how has the first year with Nadia been? How did you decide that bringing AI coaching into the organization was something that could make a material difference for your managers on the ground?
So I'll get us started. I'm next, I guess. So I'm Matt Dreyer. I'm head of talent management at Prudential Financial. And one of the things that we had been trying to figure out for years was we absolutely understood the value of coaching. We spent a lot of investment of time and dollars with our most senior executives to hire external coaches. We built an internal cadre of coaches who got us from coaching dozens of people to hundreds of people. And we had a scale problem because it's really hard to scale coaching to everybody in a 40,000 person organization doing it that way. And we had a timing problem, which was my coachees would still say, I should have talked to you about this last week before this happened, but, we didn't have a meeting until this week. And so we've been looking at potential technology solutions as AI solutions got more and more sophisticated. And that brings us to the answer to the question, which is this time last year, I had just come out of another talent roundtable discussion with another organization, and we had heard about this tool called Nadia. And I said, yeah, been there, done that, seen these AI coaches. They don't really coach. There's some clunky, like if-then statements in the background with an algorithm that try to demonstrate empathy and then make some recommendations based on what, they think the topic is. And they said, try it out at SIOP. They're going to be there, Valence, and see what you think. And I went down to the where all the vendors, are set up in the big room, and I did a demo, and I literally walked away from the demo texting my boss and my CHRO saying, I've solved our coaching problem. Wait till I get back and tell you about this tool called Nadia. So that was a year ago to basically this week, or whatever the week was for SIOP. By June, July, we were under contract. By September, we had launched what we were calling a year-long pilot. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we structured that pilot in a bit. But 6 months in, we've had over 3,000 people who have had over 12,000 coaching conversations. And one of the most frequent comments that I get from people who use it, other than, can I also give it to all these other people who would benefit, is it was ready when I needed it. It gave me exactly what I needed when I needed it, and it actually coached me. And it solved the scale issue for us, and it solved the, how do I put this in the hands of our people exactly when they need it, not when a coach is available. So that's a little bit about my story so far.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And so my name is Katie Holloway. I'm a consultant as part of our global talent management COE at Inizio. And we're still very early on in our journey with Nadia. We actually only launched Nadia about 3 weeks ago. And what we've done is we've completely integrated Coach Nadia into our inaugural Leader and Manager Accelerator program that just launched, again, 3 weeks ago. So we're really excited so far with what we've seen. And what we really wanted to do was find this cutting edge tool that would actually help participants with their learnings as well as their action statements to really take their leadership journey just a little bit further. And as part of this, kickoff that we had with our Coach Nadia participants, of course, it's still a little bit early to tell, but during our kickoff, we introduced Nadia to our, top leaders as well as our middle managers. And during that session, it only took 10 minutes for the chat to just be completely flooded with all of these positive remarks. And we had some senior leaders say, hey, I was pretty skeptical about this, and I wasn't really sure if it was really going to provide that much value to me. But within a couple of minutes of a conversation with Nadia, they really saw that she really can dive into the issue that you're handling and dig into and give you tangible advice for sticky situations that you may not have really considered. And so we've had, again, we're still very early on in our process, but so far have seen a lot of positive remarks and success.
How about now? Did you hear my little intro in the back so far? Brad, Experian, journey. Yeah. We've been on this journey that started in February of last year. Got exposed to the generative AI tool, and it looked kind of interesting. And we said, let's open it up to 50 leaders. Let's see what they do. They seem to like it. So rather than say let's go whole hog and really launch it to our 5,000 leaders, we decided to create demand. And we said to our regional talent management teams, do you have any intact teams that might be interested? Are there leaders and broad groups going through change that might be interested? Do you have any specific needs in your region? And we didn't just open it up to the leader then, but then the leader had to jump a little hurdle. They had to go to our training session. They had to try it out. They had to understand what the value is and try it. And we went from 50 leaders to, I think we have about 1,000 of our leaders who have meaningful engaged with the tool as of a couple of months ago. So I'd imagine 1,100 now, and we're launching to all 23,000 of our employees on April 23rd. In that journey, what I'd like to mention of just kind of interesting high level, and we could go into other pieces over the rest of the hour. We've trained Nadia on different aspects of what's important to Experian. We started by training on our characteristics of great leadership so she could speak our language. We then, when it was Great Place to Work results time, that's our org effectiveness, our org health survey, trained her in how to have a conversation with the leader on what were your results, how might we partner in order to help drive engagement on your team. We have trained Nadia on how to guide a conversation to give feedback in the context of our performance management process. And now we're fully integrating the tool in the context of performance management, from goal setting to driving ongoing engagement through to feedback. There's something else cool that we're launching or launched around a leader of leader generative AI powered program for development, which I'll mention in a little while. But that's been our journey so far. It's been kind of cool.
That's kind of loud. My name's Richard Chambers. I work at General Mills. I lead our talent, assessment, change and transformation teams. We're in a similar place, I think, to what everybody else shared. But the one build I would have is our barrier to, or our entry point, with Valence was much different, I think. We didn't actually seek out a leadership development coach. We had a different problem, which was around change and change management and building a very specific capability in our organization. We think about change as kind of small, medium, large type of change. And we were looking for a way to support people with a capability in the flow of work. So imagine leaders and employees that have to lead change, those small to medium-sized changes. We were looking for something that could help coach them and use our frameworks and tools in the flow of work when they need it most. And just to kind of illustrate some of the power of this and how we really suck people in was, if I went to Nadia and I said, hey, I've got a stakeholder meeting in 2 hours from now. Can you help me prep for it? Nadia would be like, well, let's learn some more first. Like, well, let me ask you some questions. Like, what's the change that you're trying to implement? Like, tell me about this stakeholder. It would ask questions, seek to understand. It would recommend our tools and resources. And it would also do things like offer to role play that stakeholder conversation with you to get practice. But the real money for me is the fact that Nadia then would email you at the end of the day and say, hey, how'd your stakeholder meeting conversation go? Do you want to continue the conversation and think about building out a more robust change plan going forward? So it would have that nudge to pull you back into the tool and help you continue to build that capability.
Richard, one of the things you mentioned when we were prepping for this was the number of languages that people ended up using Nadia in. And I personally was super surprised by that number. And I wonder if you can kind of share that little aspect as well.
Yes. And before I give you that number, what I'll tell you is for anything legal compliance or performance and rewards, we have to communicate in 15 languages, given where we operate. We typically choose to communicate in about 6. We had over 28 languages spoken to Nadia, and literally spoken, not just written, but you can also put it into like conversational mode and literally have a conversation verbally versus typing it in.
And you guys touched on sort of the audiences that you were deploying Nadia to. So managers lower down in the organization who typically wouldn't have had the experience of an executive coach. I wonder if you guys can build on that and share, like, what are the nitty-gritty topics that people are bringing to Nadia, and what are people's reactions? And Katie, you spoke to this a little bit, but what are people saying about how she is helping them in these kind of sticky moments?
Sure. And our rollout of this was a little bit different. We decided to go big and start at the bottom. So we didn't start with our senior most leaders. We actually started with, I think initial invite went out to 1,500 members of our BRGs, our business resource groups. We monthly have been adding new user groups to that because we are kind of growing it over time. And a lot of the growth of this has been through grassroots. It's been people using it, going back and asking us if we could get their whole team on, or a peer or somebody else. And we've been adding people as we've gone through that. The other thing we did was we asked people if they would like to participate. So people received an invitation and they could decline. Majority of people at Prudential said, yes, I'd love to participate. Thank you for the opportunity. And when they did, we asked them what they might want to talk about and how they might want to use it and how comfortable they were with AI. Interestingly, a lot of those folks said, I'm not really comfortable with AI, but I'll give this a shot. And one of our things that we're going to measure over time is, do they become more comfortable with AI as a result of this positive experience? Of those who said they didn't want to try the pilot, the most common reason was, I don't have time. Ironically, a lot of people use Nadia to better manage their time. So we are going to go back to those folks and suggest that maybe they get in there and give it a shot and try to manage their time better as opposed to just avoiding doing things. But to get to your question, the things that people have been talking to Nadia about are things like the most common topics kind of fall under general categories of communications. I have to have a difficult conversation. I have to figure out how to influence somebody. How do I do that? Help me write this. Help me practice role playing through this conversation, how it might go. The other big categories would be kind of general interpersonal and team dynamics. Career growth is a big one at Prudential. And then getting a little bit more specific about, I want to develop this particular skill. We also nudge around certain use cases. We rolled out a leadership model, and the use case we generally went with was, you have access to a coach now. It's an AI coach, and you talk to the AI coach about what you want to talk to your coach about. That's how coaching works, right? What do you want to be coached on today? However, we also give some people some nudges. So when we get to our 2+2 feedback conversations, we nudge people to think about how they want to, what do they want to message and how do they want to message it? How do I want to receive feedback? We do this at performance management time, at goal setting, development planning. And when we rolled out our new leadership model, we trained Nadia up on it, and we nudged people to go in and have a conversation about this new leadership model and figure out where you have strength and where you have development opportunities. So those are some of the main topics. In terms of some of the things that people are saying, is they're saying that they're getting new insights from Nadia. It's helping them to do some self-reflection. It's helping them tactically work through an issue and come up with a plan. It's saving them a lot of time. They're getting really robust advice when they need it. We also have HR business partners and managers coming and saying, people have told them about conversations they've had with Nadia that they would have had to have before that. So when I said there were 12,000 conversations that happened, if we conservatively estimate that those conversations were like 10 or 15 minutes, we basically, Nadia served as a 1.5 like human coaches for the course of that year or 6 months, and saved us that much people time, who could then go do other things as part of their day job.
Thank you so much. So since we're still a little bit early on in our pilot program, we don't necessarily have all of the metrics, but what I do want to talk about is how we have designed Coach Nadia to be integrated into our program and how participants are interacting with it. And so prior to the program, participants did receive access to Coach Nadia, and we really encourage them to use Coach Nadia to help them prepare for the program, help them set these leadership goals and intentions that they can follow through. And something that's also great is with Coach Nadia, we've included prompts throughout the program to really help guide participants on how they can use Coach Nadia. So for example, if they have a go-do action learning that asks them to go and talk to a colleague about some feedback that they've been kind of struggling to provide in the past, we've included call outs on all of our training materials guiding people. Hey, when you go to Coach Nadia, these are the sort of things that you can talk to her about when you're seeking her help for whatever task that you need it for. And I think for what's been really beneficial about this program so far, what we're really excited to see is that even after the program, they'll still have access to Coach Nadia. And so they'll have that real-time support to help them continue with their learnings as well as their leadership journey. And so far, we're really excited to just continue on our journey and see what else we can unlock, as well as understand more about, what people are conversing with Coach Nadia about, and then how we can strategically invest in those different, needs that they have.
It's SIOP, so a couple of stats. So 45% of the conversations with Experian leaders, very similar trend, are communication related. So I have to have a difficult feedback conversation. Can you role play with me? 21% are team dynamics related. And then it kind of splinters out from there. The biggest and most interesting surprise was the language that people are using when they're having these conversations. Much more often than you would expect, they're coming to talk with Nadia in a heightened emotional state. Like, that's what you're supposed to talk to a human coach about. So that was a really interesting surprise for us to get still getting our arms around, like, what's the implication of that versus what we might speak with a human coach about. The other thing in terms of what people are talking with Nadia about, and this is probably of all the things that we're doing, I'm most excited about, is it's a program we have. It's called Enriching Leadership, a little catchphrase. It's a leader of leader program where through use of our technology, the leader takes their 360. We will recommend, why don't you take these 4 modules that align with our Experian leadership behaviors. And once you go into the module, that's where Nadia takes over. And Nadia will welcome you. What do you want to talk about today? What did you learn from your 360? What are you curious about? You have a conversation with Nadia, and then the learner co-creates an experiment to try in the real world. And that's easier said than done, because what's the right experiment for a leader of leader to try in the real world? So we did a lot of testing. That experiment's too easy. That experiment's going to take too long. That experiment counters what we're already doing. And train Nadia on the right kind of experiment or dialogue to have. For example, when I was testing with it, the experiment that I did was, the feedback that I received, I suppose, is maybe I talk too much. Thanks. So the experiment I co-created with Nadia is, hey, Brad, in your next meeting with your peers, the heads of talent management in the regions, if you're presenting, why don't you not present anything? Send out as a pre-read and start the meeting by just listening. And I co-created this experiment with Nadia. It was her idea. And then at the end of, after we run the experiment, just leave it, Nadia will loop back with me and say, how'd it go? She'll ask me along the way, did you have your experiment? How'd it go? I remember this was important to you. And give me those nudges to come back. So we're able to track this data and see where are we falling off, where are leaders leaning in, which of our 16 leadership capabilities are our leaders most interested in running experiments on. We're gathering that data right now, but it's, I think, a super interesting way to use this tool.
I like going last because I can say, yep, all that resonates, that all sits with us. A couple places I would double click, though, that I think have been really powerful. Matt mentioned this grassroots movement kind of at the beginning. One of the things that we've been really keen to do is make sure we're creating value for the business. And that has started with going back to our business leaders to source what are real problems that they're facing today that they could use that help with in the flow of work. And then making sure that we're creating those use cases and recordings for them so that they actually have some way to get into the tool as a first case. And it is so good that it just pulls people back in and they find other ways to use it. 2 specific examples that I like to highlight is one in our manufacturing environment. I think this is an unlock for us and our people leaders in manufacturing. So if you envision for a second, half of our workforce population is in manufacturing. And a lot of those leaders might be, new kids with undergraduate degrees in engineering, and they're working second shift and they're leading a team of 20 production employees. And they don't have a peer to go and talk to, or they don't have an HRBP on that shift. They're using this tool to get that coaching and get that support in the moment when they need it. And not only does it help them, but it then helps that entire production population and helps drive their engagement better for us. One of the other really great use cases that we have is as a part of our selection process, if you're selected, you get a strengths and opportunity-based development report when you join the organization. We teach you about it. We teach you how to use it. And people are like, you want me to go have a conversation with my leader about my opportunity areas on day one? We've paired it with Nadia as a coach to help you build a development plan and make sure you're leveraging those data so that you can show up your best and work up to having that conversation with your leader. And it breaks down some of those barriers. One of the things we've also heard, or I've heard from audiences in the past, is around these types of conversations that we see contrary is people are more willing to have sensitive conversations with Nadia. Like the rule of like no dumb question, they're more willing to ask AI a question than they are willing to call their HR business partner or a peer of theirs and get the support or help they actually need versus sitting there going, how do I handle this?
Thank you, Richard. Brad, Nadia has given me the same feedback that I am very verbose, so I can relate. We'll switch the order, Richard, and put you on the spot. But I think you have done an amazing job with this one, so I'd love to highlight it. But I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are wondering, how does Nadia fit with the other AI applications that my organization is rolling out? Whether that is, Copilot or an internal GPT. So maybe if you could each speak to how you see Nadia augmenting, sitting beside those other products and tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime we onboard folks to Nadia or to our internal LLM, which we call Mills Chat, we always talk about each other. So we made sure we partnered with that team to help people understand. And we usually use a graphic that talks about like breadth versus depth. We're very keen to talk about Nadia as a leadership development coach, or truly as a coach, and how it's different and how you should leverage these tools differently. Our internal LLM is really that breadth. So traditional prompt engineering, like you go and ask and it recalls, it gives you an answer to whatever you need, and it's got a large knowledge base. Nadia is not going to give you an answer right away. It's going to ask you other questions. It actually coaches you. We have internal coaches who are ICF certified, et cetera, and they're like, whoa, like it's coaching the coach. It's asking those types of reflection questions in the flow versus just giving you an answer to a prompt that you provided. So we spend a lot of time making sure that we educate our populations on how they should think about leveraging those different tools depending on the types of things they're trying to accomplish.
So I'm going to share something we're learning, and I'm going to maybe ask you all if any of you have a point of view on this to capture me afterwards, because I haven't figured this out yet. So I'll compare Nadia to real coaches, to live coaches. If you were to look on our companies, it's called Leadership Exchange, which is kind of our proprietary platform that our 5,000 leaders connect with each other, learn from each other. There's a base of knowledge, there's a podcast series, they learn about their teams, that kind of stuff. You'll find access to Nadia, and you'll find access to on-demand live coaches. Interestingly, the conversation is similar that they have with both. Here's something interesting that we're learning. Well, number one, it's becoming much harder for my teammates and I to differentiate when to go to one or the other, which is making it harder for me to differentiate why I need to spend the money on a live coach. Again, SIOP, let me throw a data point at you, and I haven't figured this out yet. So one of the things that we look at is great place to work. I don't know if any of you use that as your survey. There's a stat, an index in there called leadership effectiveness. We have found, so our average leadership effectiveness score, 84, right? That's pretty good. We're proud of that. Goes up to 100. Those leaders who engaged, remember the 1,000 leaders I told you about who engaged with Nadia, happen to have a leadership effectiveness index of 87. Leaders who engage with the live coaches have a leadership index 2 points lower than average. Why is that? Is Nadia driving that difference meaningfully, that their leadership is better coming out of it? I have a theory. I haven't worked this out yet. My theory is that leaders who know that they have an issue to work through, a tactical issue to work through, are going to use Nadia. They're getting a tool, they're getting perspective in the moment, and it's helping them to raise the bar. These are leaders who are quite self-aware in my theory. Leaders who've been told they need a coach. Now, that could be for development reasons. It could be to go from great to fantastic. But leaders who typically are told you should be working with a live coach to help you work through something or to create awareness where there might not be any are being directed to the live coach. It's not surprising that there's a lower leadership effectiveness scores for that for that cohort of leader. So anyway, that's something I'm working through. My teammates and I are working through how to go to one type of solution versus another. And if you all have any ideas on that, that's something we're really interested in.
Thank you. And so at Inizio, we actually have a Gen AI learning and development roadmap that we've developed to really drive Gen AI fluency and adoption. And within this roadmap, we have our innovation fund that is funding different sorts of tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, Microsoft Teams, and we're providing these licenses to our teams so they can go out and really test these tools, test out the use cases, and kind of see where the value is and build that business case. And that's sort of where Coach Nadia fits in. And I think too, one of the really, really strong benefits of Coach Nadia that some of our other speakers have also hinted at is it can be custom built to your values, to your behaviors. And so at Inizio, we just rolled out brand new target behaviors for 2025 of drive, collaboration, agility, and curiosity. And Coach Nadia, with these behaviors being customized within her, she's really been able to tie back her responses and drill down like why curiosity is so important and how you can enable collaboration across different teams. And so this all again fits underneath our Gen AI learning and development roadmap. And as part of this series as well, we have different bi-monthly learning series where we bring in internal and external experts to come talk to you Inizio about different tools that they're using, success cases, and so the value that they're seeing. And we'll actually have Parker Mitchell join us in April to come and talk about Coach Nadia and the benefits and also what the future of AI looks like when everyone has a coach and what it looks like when we could democratize that sort of learning. And so within this roadmap, again, I think it's really important as well to tie it back as well as like what your behaviors are, as well as your different strategic pillars. And I think what's been really beneficial as well is our collaboration with all of our different teams, with our learning and development team, DEI team, IT. I mean, our Gen AI Council is also heavily involved. And so with their support, I think it's really helped drive momentum and really differentiate, why Coach Nadia is so beneficial, because she has been built specifically to coach, to be a leadership coach. And so you can go and talk to ChatGPT and open up a project and feed her some information, but the way that she responds to you just won't be at the same in depth, and it won't have that sort of IO expertise that's really been built into Coach Nadia.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I would mirror a lot of that, which is I think the biggest place where we try to differentiate between our instance of ChatGPT and Nadia is, hey, if you want to get a quick answer based on all the good stuff that's out on the internet, go ask the ChatGPT, right? Like, what's the average temperature in Nebraska in June? Or what are ways that people are using skills in organizations? Great. It'll give you a good generic crowdsourced response from the internet. Nadia will give you a tailored response based on all the conversations that you've had with Nadia, right? So Nadia will remember that you were having a challenging conversation with one of your team members, or that you tend to be verbose and you're trying to work on that, or whatever it is, and we'll incorporate that in. And the more that you use Nadia, the more tailored that's going to be. And so what we'll say is, hey, look, if you're going to try to go use ChatGPT to summarize, end of year conversation or end of year feedback for your team, and you use ChatGPT, it's going to give you some pretty generic stuff based on whatever you upload into it, but it's not going to have the context. If you've been using Nadia all year long it's going to incorporate all of that information in there as well as whatever else you feed in at that time.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to ask you guys one more question, then turn it over to the audience to share any questions with the group. What would you guys say one of kind of the biggest lessons learned that you would want to share with others who are exploring new technology, whether that's AI or something else that feels really novel and different? How did you overcome the challenges and hurdles, and what would you share as lessons?
Sure, I'll jump in. I'm going to shamelessly steal a quote from somebody, and I forget who said it at the NYU coaching conference last year, which was, and we were early days with all of this, but if you look at some of these tools today and you're like, wow, that's really good, but this is as bad as these tools will ever be. They're just going to continue to get better, and they're going to get better a lot faster than prior technologies have gotten faster. And so instead of asking like, oh, when's the right time to get in? Like it has to get, I'm waiting for that next feature, this one wrinkle to be worked out. If you're not in on this yet, why aren't you in on this yet? Why are you not providing these types of tools to your employees? Because your employees are going and finding tools if you're not providing them. Our net promoter score for Nadia is a 74. HR tools don't have 74 net promoter scores. They just don't. So for us, it wasn't, it was getting over kind of our conservative nature and saying, well, why wouldn't we give this opportunity to our employees? And the other one I would say is let go of some of the control. For us, it was, we're going to provide access. You talk to Nadia about what you want to talk about, and we don't need to know. It's completely confidential. We do not get transcripts of the conversations. This is between you and your AI coach. Just like a coaching engagement is between you and your human coach, same thing with Nadia. And we're okay with that. We don't have to direct everything. We trust our employees, and we trust this technology to come together and have an overall positive impact.
So one of the struggles I think that we've seen with adoption of different Gen AI tools is that people oftentimes feel like they don't have the time to take it, they don't have that time to invest in learning this new tool. And oftentimes it can be really daunting, especially if you've never used a Gen AI tool. But I want to remind you all that we are all on a learning curve when it comes to Gen AI. It's constantly changing. And so I think just being open and curious about what is out there is a really important value to hold on to. And I think as well, with addressing some of the concerns that people have, I think it's really important to make AI not just an add-on tool. It's not something that you have to go out and do. For example, with our accelerator program, we don't have it to where you have to sit down for 10 minutes and talk to Coach Nadia. We've integrated Coach Nadia to where when you have a feedback conversation, when you need to do these things that you need to really build up your leadership toolkit, use Coach Nadia to support you. She's there to listen. And like we've said before, the more you talk to Coach Nadia, the more she learns about you, and she'll pull out insights about yourself that you didn't even previously know. And so I think really kind of giving people like the opportunity and a chance, that freedom to kind of just go out and explore is really important, really embody that curiosity, and also provide them with the support and resources that they do need. So for example, with our Leader Manager Accelerator kickoff, we had 30 minutes dedicated to just focusing on Coach Nadia, how it will be supported. And they got to go into Coach Nadia, play with her for 10 minutes and see that value herself. And I think that stickiness and that initial reaction has really brought people back into the tool as well. And so in all, I'd say, if you can integrate it into their daily work and provide them with the learning resources and tell them even, these are some recommended use cases, but let me know if you still find others. I think that's really important to just give them a little bit of a head start on using this tool, especially because so many of us are unfamiliar. We may have, some gaps in how comfortable we feel in interacting with an AI tool.
So the big lesson learned, and a quick funny anecdote that I think is related as well. So this is gonna, for those who were in the 360 session an hour ago, it's gonna sound like I stole this, but it's on my iPad. Strategy drives purpose, right? So where we were a year ago is, oh my God, this is fun, this is interesting, I want to learn more. And then if you all remember where I was saying, and then we train Nadia to help leaders with great place to work results. And Nadia is helping integrate and appreciate our characteristics of great leadership. Nadia is now helping our leaders to create better goals, because we're, like all your companies, going through a transformation where having the right goals is going to be really important. And so on. All of that is driven from our business strategy to our talent management strategy. And then we're looking at, well, what are the tools we have at our disposal? And that's the biggest lesson learned in terms of the journey that we've been on. The 2-second anecdote is you reminded me of the idea of customization. So I was testing Nadia in that Leader of Leader program, and I had to come up with topics, right? Because I can't keep using the same ones that are about me. So I made one up about having a challenging boss that didn't listen to me. So fast forward a couple of weeks, and we're ready to roll out the tool, and my boss and I are on a call, and you might see where this is going. I said, Leslie, let me share my screen with you so you could see what I've been experiencing. And Nadia shows up to the meeting and says, Brad, I recall you've been working. We've had conversations about a difficult boss, and these are some things you've been working on. How's that going? I said, Leslie, let me stop sharing my screen for a moment and explain what's going on here. And it led to a bigger conversation about personalization and about that one-on-one conversation, feeling like it's with someone who actually knows you. So anyway, that's what we've been learning. And don't share your screen.
How many of you use executive coaches today in your organizations? By show of hands. How many of you are very confident that you're getting your return on investment for what they cost? In this day and age, I think having the data and the ability to make sure that you're getting that return on investment is really important. And that's one of the things that we've been able to do with a digital AI coach, is be able to really get down to the numbers and use those to help guide us in the moment. We've recently gone through many business case creation as of late so we could continue to scale Nadia. So I'm really well versed in some of our numbers right now. And I also would, the Valence people in the room are snickering a little bit because we have a very rigorous generative AI council, and that's not being facetious. It's like very rigorous. The bar is very high. And yet we've gotten through them. And part of the reason I highlight that is with all of this generative AI that's out there, right? There's going to be risk in everything we do. But you have to balance that risk with the value creation. And this is something where we can actually demonstrate tangible value creation for our organization. One example I'd give is we do a lot of our own internal research. We did this really large research study that we called Invest in Manager. And we talked to our leaders and we said, hey, when you have an HR question or a leadership question, like what do you do? Almost every one of them told us they call another leader, they call 2 or 3 leaders, or they call their HR business partner. Okay, now you just had 3 30-minute conversations. That was 90 minutes of your time. And the other thing that typically happens is they got 3 different answers. We were able to show when we started piloting with Nadia, smaller population, so envision about 2,500 leaders that had over 3,000 conversations with Nadia. And we can thematically look on the back end and say, hey, of all the conversations, 3,000 of them were the types of conversations they would have typically gone to a business partner for or to a peer for. They got consistent information, and you saved our organization at least an hour of time. So you created capacity at the same time. The 2 things I'd highlight there are 1, the capacity creation, but 2, not just the consistent answer, but similar to Brad, Nadia understands what our leadership competency model is and how to speak our language, right? It also ensures that they're getting consistent messaging that we want them to have at the same time and gets us kind of all moving in the same direction.
One quick thing. Yeah, I also just want to, since we are at SIOP and we've been doing some internal research around testing some of the things we've heard from naysayers, right? Well, things like, well, only the younger generation is going to use this thing. Well, we've seen no generational differences between the rate at which different generations are opting in and using Nadia. Somehow those of us over the age of like 35 are somehow managing to click on a link and, utilize this tool. We know that research has shown in the past that women tend to adopt new technologies sometimes at a lower rate than men. We're actually seeing women opt in at a greater rate than men. We're seeing people of color opt in at a greater rate than their white counterparts. It's still early days. We're 6 months in, but those are really encouraging for us in terms of one of the things we said in the beginning was we want to scale and provide more equitable access to things that we know are really good talent practices. And, we're seeing the data support the fact that this tool is helping us to do that. We're still going to use human coaches. Human coaches have a place, and they serve a purpose, and we think they are valuable. This is also valuable. This is an and, not an or for us, and we're going to continue to use it in that way.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you all for the insights. I'm sure this has raised questions for people in the audience, so happy to open it up. If anybody wants to put their hand up, I can come. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So you guys talked a lot about developmental coaching and the type of coaching that you've used AI for. I'm wondering if you could also talk about transitional coaching and if that's also been effective in that space. So thinking about a leader moving from one area to another, one region to another division, another product.
Yeah, it's one of the use cases we've been looking at and trying to expand. Right now we have a number of licenses, so if we move to an enterprise license and can kind of go whole hog on sending this out to everybody, one of the case studies or one of the use cases will be all new hires will get access as part of the standard process. Anytime you switch a job, anytime you get promoted, anytime you get a new manager.
Jump past. This is an idea, right? We're on our roadmap. We currently have a transition guide, 90-day transition guide. It's like 60 pages. It's really well thought. We've trained our HRBPs up on it and our talent management partners, and they're the ones accountable as we have a new leader come in. They use this guide in order to help the new leader acclimate. Why not, and it's on our roadmap, train Nadia on this 90-day guide? Why not, when somebody comes in, they get the message from Nadia, welcome to the company. In your first month, are you thinking about who you need to build relationships with? What did you need to learn? At the end of every week, why not a message from her saying, what did you learn this week? What mistakes did you make? Is there somebody who gave you an insight you didn't expect? So why not have this tool guide you through your transition in a meaningful way, in a more customized and personal way, frankly, than the HRBP who's going to be supporting a couple of thousand people. So that's one of the couple of next steps in our journey. It's a really good question.
Thank you. Can I ask one more and then I promise I'm done? It's about manager input, right? So when you have a lot of these engagements, right, often there's an alignment call with the manager, the employee, the coach, and I'm wondering how the manager input feeds into this whole AI thing, or is this strictly the employee, right, saying this is my issue that I'm going to work on? You touched on it a little bit, right? But it almost feels like it solves for the person that knows I need to work on this capability, but it doesn't solve for the person that doesn't know I have a blind spot and I need to work on this capability.
I have the mic and I have a point of view on this, but my peers do also. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, no. So I'll say that at Inizio, that's a great question about, what's the manager's involvement? Because typically with our top talent individuals, they do have that alignment meeting with their human executive coach. And what we've done is we have included the manager so that they can not necessarily understand, let me back up. They don't necessarily understand the back end and themes that their employees are conversing with Coach Nadia on, but they are aware that their employees are using Coach Nadia. They understand the value of Coach Nadia, and we've asked our managers to really encourage their employees and their direct reports to use her for their development their development needs. And as part of that conversation as well, we've also encouraged our people who are using Coach Nadia, go talk to your manager about the different needs that Coach Nadia has pointed out to you. And so we're really focusing in on having our employees kind of own and drive their career, and then themselves initiating a check-in with their manager after having a conversation with Nadia to kind of talk through their development plan and needs.
So one quick question I had. Could you describe real quick what was easy or what was difficult about getting Nadia trained up on your nomenclatures, frameworks, assets, so that it could be really conversationally fluent with those things in the coaching? And then quick question for Brad. Did you notice any difference in the topics between live coaches and Nadia?
So I can take the first one, which was, it was really easy. And we, for example, our leadership model, we had what the areas were, definition, some example behaviors. And it was just a matter of working with Valence to get them uploaded, have a few practice conversations, perhaps make a tweak in some of the language was being used. So for example, we call it our global leadership DNA. I think it was calling it our global leadership model, and it was fixed very quickly. So super easy to get the models incorporated.
Well, then I go.
I'll hit the first one real quick. I would just say, again, our experience has been really easy as well. Maybe over a course of 48 hours after the Valence team has fed in our frameworks, we spend time doing two things, what they call tuning as well as adjusting for temperature. So making sure that it's picking up on key phrases and language to point you into that direction. And then the second piece, temperature around how much generative AI do we want in there versus pushing us into the right direction. And our teams give feedback and they make adjustments and we go back and forth and we hone it into where we want it.
And I would say the training is going to vary from my experience. So the opposite end of that was when we were building the Leader of Leader program. The experiments that Nadia would recommend at first really varied. Some of them were quite easy, and some of them were like, "Hey, leader, what you might consider doing is create a 360 for yourself." It's like, "Oh God, I don't want them to do that at all. I just invested all this money and time in a 360." But so we looked at those experiments with a whole bunch of pilots. Where a lot of you probably worked in an agile model like we do, which is all about test and learn. And that's what we did. We tested and learned it, and through the different kinds of experiments, came up with something appropriate. The second question was, I'd say the main difference that I'm seeing now is that when somebody has a concern with their direct supervisor, that's coming out more frequently in the live one-on-ones versus a dialogue with Nadia. I don't have the answer, but whenever I was going to like 45%, right? Pretty much the same in what they're talking about with human coaches. It's the main difference I see is when they're actually frustrated with something that went on with their direct supervisor superior.
Thanks.
Hello. Thank you so much for the presentation. So humans are already spending less and less time with other humans. And so I see sort of one unforeseen consequence here is that people are going to start relying more on technology and less on their networks, their peers, other leaders in the company. And so my question is specifically for you, Richard, because you brought up the example of the one leader calling three other leaders, getting three different answers. There's so much more in that conversation that gets strengthened through that interaction than just an answer to the question. So I'm just curious, what are some ways maybe that you can ensure that leaders continue to maintain these critical human relationships in the organization?
That's a great question. It's something that we've wrestled with quite a bit, actually. And the way I think about a lot of things in leadership are in terms of paradoxes or polarities. So I'd say your question maybe sits along one continuum, talking only to technology versus not using it all and talking only to leaders. Our company doesn't have I'm going to use an example or a parallel for a second. We're not like, oh, you have to be back in office or fully remote. What we've done is we've taught our leaders to have the right conversations with what we call work with heart and identify moments that matter where you should come together. I'd use the same example here. We've made sure that as we've built out principles and as we educate people to leverage these tools, helping them understand where you're going to get the most value creation from having a conversation with Nadia versus having the most value from having a conversation with your boss or a peer of yours. And I think that there's probably some consistency across organizations, and that's probably something you need to wrestle with within your own organization as well, because your point around being human is something that makes each of our companies unique, and you don't want to lose or undermine those cultures, and you'll have to answer that and wrestle with it for yourself and how it comes to life.
Just add one quick thing. I know we're past time, so Alex is about to cut us off here.
No.
What I would also say is, anecdotally, what we've found from user feedback is they're still having the conversation when they feel it's appropriate with the human, and they feel better prepared to have that conversation because they've had the conversation first with Nadia. So they said, I wasn't going to talk to my boss or my peer or my HR partner about this, but now I have something I can go in with a better idea of how I feel about the situation and perhaps a better solution for it. I'm going to have that conversation as opposed to the one I felt uncomfortable about.
I know we are at times, so if people need to pop out to other sessions, no one is coming into this room right after us. So if there are a couple other questions, I think we can. I'm holding you guys captive. I hope you don't mind.
Well, I'd love to ask you about the frequency and duration of the conversations. For example, what % of your users interact with Nadia on a weekly basis?
I might have a stat.
During our piloting phase, we have about 25% of our population engaging at least multiple times a week.
So, that's because remember I mentioned earlier, we make them go through training, and in the training and access it the first time. It's that return user that I care about. Like when no one's looking, it's 58% return. It's higher in some regions than others. Like one of our regions, it's 90%. They have more resources focusing on following up with the leaders and supporting them, reminding them, incorporating into day-to-day.
Thank you all so much. I'm actually told I'm wrong, and we do need this room back. But please come up and chat with us while we tidy up and whatnot. So thank you all so much.